Please don't hurt us. We'll be quiet, we promise. 3 small voices spoke as one in the darkness, barely louder than the wind cutting through the empty street. Ethan froze mid-step, his breath catching as he spotted them, triplet girls, no older than 6, pressed together on a frozen bus stop bench. Their bare feet were blue against the concrete. Their thin coats might as well have been tissue paper. And their eyes, God, their eyes held a terror no child should ever know. It was Christmas Eve, 15 degrees below freezing, and someone had left them here to die. But as Ethan knelt down in the snow, trying to coax them to safety, he had no idea that the father who'd done this was already watching from across the street. And what would happen next would test everything Ethan thought he knew about right and wrong. But let's back up 6 hours, because you need to understand who Ethan was before this moment changed everything. The grease from the diner's kitchen had seeped into Ethan's skin years ago, a permanent reminder of the life he'd built from nothing. 38 years old, 2 jobs, 1 daughter, and a checking account that laughed at him every time he tried to buy anything beyond the basics. He wiped down the last table at Murphy's Diner, his lower back screaming in protest, and glanced at the clock. 10:45. Lily would be asleep by now, safe with Mrs. Patterson next door. You heading out, Ethan? Joe, the night manager, called from the kitchen. Yeah. Merry Christmas, Joe. You too, buddy. Stay warm out there. Ethan pushed through the door into air so cold it felt like needles against his face. Christmas lights blazed from every storefront window in Oakwood, twinkling and cheerful, while speakers pumped out carols about joy and family and coming home. He shoved his hands deeper into his jacket pockets and started the 40-minute walk back to his apartment. 5 years. 5 years since Emma had packed her bags and walked out with nothing but a note on the kitchen counter. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. No explanation. No forwarding address. Just Ethan and a 4-year-old daughter, trying to figure out how to be a family with half their pieces missing. He'd gotten good at it, though. Lily was happy, healthy, loved. She had friends at school, a bedroom full of second-hand toys, and a father who would have walked through fire for her. What she didn't have was a mother, new clothes, or a Christmas tree this year because Ethan's car had died last week and taken $700 with it. The street was empty, shops closed, everyone home with their families. Ethan's footsteps echoed off the buildings as he walked, his breath forming white clouds that disappeared into the darkness. Just another Christmas Eve. Just another. He saw them. At first, his exhausted brain tried to make sense of it. Maybe they were dolls someone had left behind. Maybe he was seeing things. But then one of the small shapes moved, and Ethan's heart dropped into his stomach. 3 little girls sat huddled on the bus stop bench, wrapped around each other like they were trying to merge into one person. Their coats were so thin he could see their clothes underneath, and their feet, Jesus Christ, their feet were bare against the frozen concrete, red and swollen. Ethan broke into a run. Hey! His voice came out too loud, too urgent, and all 3 girls flinched like he'd struck them. He skidded to a stop 10 feet away, hands up, palms out. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. Are you okay? Where are your parents? The girl in the middle pulled her sisters closer, and that's when Ethan saw their faces clearly under the streetlight. Triplets, identical down to the dark eyes now staring at him with pure, primal fear. Please don't hurt us, the middle girl whispered. We'll be quiet, we promise. We'll be so quiet. The words hit Ethan like a punch. He crouched down slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening. I'm not going to hurt you, sweetheart. I promise. My name is Ethan. I'm a dad. I have a daughter about your age. Can you tell me your names? Silence. The wind picked up, and all 3 girls shivered violently. I'm just trying to help, Ethan said, his voice cracking. It's Christmas Eve. It's freezing out here. Where's your mom or dad? The girl on the left started crying, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. The one on the right spoke, her voice flat and emotionless. Daddy said we have to stay outside. What? Why? We took food. We were hungry, and we took bread and cheese, and he said thieves have to sleep outside to learn their lesson. Ethan felt the world tilt. He looked around the empty street, at the closed shops, at the Christmas decorations, mocking him with their cheerful glow. Someone had done this. Some adult had looked at 3 6-year-old children and decided they deserved to freeze. How long have you been out here? Since it got dark, the middle girl said. He drove away in his truck. He said, maybe if we were good and quiet, he'd come back and let us in. Maybe. Ethan's hands were shaking, and not from the cold. He thought about Lily, safe and warm in their apartment. He thought about his own childhood, the foster homes, the system that moved kids around like broken toys. He thought about the right thing to do versus the smart thing to do, and realized they weren't the same thing at all. Listen to me, he said, pulling off his jacket. The cold bit into him immediately, but he ignored it. I live 10 minutes from here. It's warm. I have food. I have a little girl who would probably love to meet you. Will you come with me? Just for tonight? The triplets looked at each other, something passing between them that Ethan couldn't read. Finally, the middle girl spoke. You promise you won't hurt us? I promise on my daughter's life. I'm just trying to help. They stood slowly, their movements stiff. Ethan draped his jacket over all three of them, and they began walking. The girls stayed pressed together, their steps small and careful, like they were waiting for the trap to spring shut. What are your names? Ethan asked gently as they walked. I'm Sophie, the middle girl said. This is Ava and Ella. How old are you? 6. We'll be 7 in February. And your dad? Does he do this a lot? Lock you outside? Sophie's silence was answer enough. They walked the rest of the way without speaking, and with every block, Ethan felt the weight of his decision settling over him. He was bringing 3 strange children into his home. He didn't know their last name, didn't know where they lived, didn't know anything except that they needed help, and he couldn't walk away. His building came into view, and Ethan fumbled with his keys, his fingers numb. The door swung open, and warm air rushed out. The girls stepped inside cautiously, like they expected the warmth to be yanked away at any second. Mrs. Patterson? Ethan called out. Lily? Mrs. Patterson appeared from the kitchen, dish towel in hand, and stopped dead when she saw the triplets. Her hand flew to her mouth. Sweet Jesus, Ethan. What happened? I found them outside. They need help. He kept his voice low, steady, trying not to alarm the girls further. Can you stay a bit longer while I figure this out? Before Mrs. Patterson could answer, Lily emerged from her bedroom in her pajamas, clutching Mr. Flops, her stuffed rabbit. She stared at the 3 girls, her eyes wide. Daddy? Who are they? Ethan knelt down beside his daughter. These are Sophie, Ava, and Ella. They're going to stay with us tonight because they're very cold and they need somewhere safe to sleep. Can you help me make them feel welcome? Lily studied the triplets for a long moment, taking in their bare feet, their thin clothes, their frightened faces. Then she walked over and held out Mr. Flops. This is my rabbit. His name is Mr. Flops, and he's really good at making people feel better when they're scared. You can hold him if you want. Ava reached out with trembling hands and took the stuffed animal, pulling it against her chest. For the first time since Ethan had found them, something shifted in her expression, a tiny crack in the wall of fear. Thank you, she whispered. Mrs. Patterson sprang into action. Let's get these girls warmed up. Ethan, you make some food. I'll find clothes and blankets. Ethan moved to the kitchen on autopilot, pulling out canned soup, crackers, the heel of a loaf of bread. It wasn't much, but it was hot and real. As the soup heated, he gripped the counter and let himself feel the full enormity of what he'd just done. 3 children, abandoned, and he'd brought them home without thinking about consequences or legality or what would happen when morning came. 15 minutes later, the triplets sat at his small kitchen table, wrapped in blankets, their feet soaking in warm water. They ate soup like they hadn't seen food in days, slow at first, then faster, their spoons scraping the bowls clean. Lily sat beside them, chattering about school and Mr. Flops and the Christmas cookies she'd helped Mrs. Patterson make last week. Where do you live? Ethan asked gently. What's your last name? Sophie looked up from her soup. Miller. We live on 7th Street, the apartments with the blue doors. And your dad's name? Jason Miller. Ethan nodded, filing it away. 7th Street was only 6 blocks from here. Close enough that this Jason could come looking. Close enough that Ethan needed to be ready. Sophie, can you tell me more about your dad? About what happened tonight? The girl's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. Ava and Ella went still, waiting. He wasn't always mean, Sophie said quietly. "When we were little, he was nice. He read us stories and made us pancakes. But then Mommy left, and he started drinking the stuff in bottles that made him smell funny. He'd go out at night and leave us alone. When we said we were hungry, he'd get mad and say we were ungrateful. We tried to be good," Ella added, her voice small. "We tried so hard, but tonight we took the food because our tummies hurt so much, and he caught us and he was so angry." Her voice broke, and Sophie pulled her close. Ethan felt something dark and hot burning in his chest. "You didn't do anything wrong. You understand me. You were hungry. Taking food when you're hungry isn't stealing, it's surviving." The triplets stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. After they'd eaten, Mrs. Patterson helped Ethan set up the girls in Lily's room. They'd sleep on blankets spread across the floor, wrapped in every spare comforter he owned. It wasn't perfect, but it was warm and safe. As he tucked them in, awkward because he'd only ever tucked in one child, before Ella looked up at him with those dark, solemn eyes. "Mr. Ethan, what happens tomorrow?" The question he'd been dreading. Ethan sat back on his heels, looking at three faces that had learned far too young that adults couldn't be trusted. "Tomorrow we figure things out," he said. "But tonight, you're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you here. What if Daddy comes? Then I'll talk to him. He gets really mad when people talk to him." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'm not afraid of your dad, sweetheart. You just sleep. I'll keep you safe." He turned off the light and stepped into the hallway, closing the door most of the way. Mrs. Patterson stood waiting, her expression grave. "Ethan, that man is going to come looking for those girls. And when he does, I know. Do you? Because this isn't just about being a good Samaritan anymore. You've got 3 children in your home without permission, without legal authority. If he calls the police, then I'll explain what I saw. 3 kids locked outside in 15-degree weather. Any cop with a conscience will see the problem there." Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "You're a good man, Ethan, but good doesn't always win, not in family court." She left, and Ethan stood alone in his tiny living room, the weight of his decision crushing down on him. Somewhere out there was Jason Miller, a man who'd locked 3 children outside to freeze, a man with legal rights to those children, no matter how much of a monster he was. And Ethan had just put himself directly in that man's path. He sank onto the couch and dropped his head into his hands, his mind racing. He should call child services. That was the right move. But child services meant foster care, meant the system, meant those 3 girls getting split up and shuffled around while their father sobered up long enough to convince a judge he deserved another chance. Ethan had lived that life. He knew how it ended. His phone buzzed, a text from his boss at the construction site, asking if he could take an extra shift on the 26th. Ethan stared at the message, thinking about his bank account, his broken car, the fact that he could barely afford to feed himself and Lily, let alone 3 more children. This was insane. He knew it was insane. But when he closed his eyes, all he saw was those 3 little girls on that bench, their bare feet blue with cold, their eyes full of terror. He texted back, "Yes." Then he opened his laptop and started searching. Laws about child abandonment, emergency custody, what to do if you suspect child abuse. The articles were dense and confusing, full of legal jargon that made his head spin. But one thing became clear. Without evidence, without proof, the system would default to keeping children with their biological parents. Ethan looked toward Lily's room, where 4 girls now slept. He thought about Emma leaving, about his own mother walking out, about every adult who'd failed him when he was young. Not this time. Whatever it took, whatever it cost, he wasn't sending those girls back to freeze, even if it destroyed him in the process. The pounding on the door started at 7:30 in the morning, violent and relentless, like someone was trying to break through the wood with their fists. Ethan jerked awake on the couch, his heart hammering. He'd fallen asleep sometime around 3, his laptop still open beside him, search results about child protection laws glowing on the screen. The pounding came again, harder this time, followed by a voice that made his blood run cold. "Open this door. I know they're in there. You have no right to open this damn door right now." Sophie appeared in the hallway, her face pale. Behind her, Ava and Ella clutched each other, their eyes wide with the same terror Ethan had seen on the bus stop bench. "It's Daddy," Sophie whispered. "He found us." Ethan stood slowly, his mind racing. Through the door's peephole, he could see a man in his early 40s, unshaven, his eyes bloodshot and wild. Jason Miller looked exactly like what he was, a drunk who'd spent the night searching for something he'd thrown away. "Girls, go back in the bedroom with Lily. Lock the door. Don't come out until I say so." "He'll hurt you," Ava said, her voice trembling. "He hurts people when he's mad." "I'll be fine. Go." They disappeared down the hall, and Ethan heard the click of the bedroom lock. He took a deep breath and opened the door, keeping his body in the doorway so Jason couldn't see inside. "Can I help you?" Jason's face twisted with rage. "Where are my daughters? I know you have them. The neighbor saw you walk past with 3 little girls last night. Those are my children, and you have no right. Your children were freezing on a bus stop bench at 11 o'clock on Christmas Eve," Ethan said, his voice level despite the anger burning in his gut. "Barefoot, in 15-degree weather. So yeah, I brought them somewhere warm. That's kidnapping. I'm calling the police right now. Go ahead, call them. I'd love to explain to the cops why 3 6-year-old girls were locked outside in the cold while their father was God knows where." Jason's face went red. "You don't know what you're talking about. Those girls are liars. They're manipulative little. They're children." Ethan cut him off, and they were terrified. What kind of father does that? What kind of stranger takes kids that aren't his? Jason shot back. "You think you're some kind of hero. You're just some loser who kidnapped my daughters. I want them back. Now." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at him to slam the door in this man's face, but he forced himself to stay calm. "They're not going anywhere until I know they'll be safe." "Safe? I'm their father. They belong with me. Being a father means more than biology. It means protecting them, feeding them, keeping them warm. You failed at all 3. Jason stepped forward, getting in Ethan's face. His breath reeked of stale beer. "Listen to me very carefully. Those are my kids, mine. I have legal custody. I have rights, and if you don't hand them over right now, I will make your life a living hell. I'll sue you. I'll have you arrested. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of pervert steals little girls. Get away from my door." Ethan's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. "Now." For a moment, they stood there, 2 men on opposite sides of a line neither could cross. Then Jason backed up, pulling out his phone. "Fine, we'll let the cops sort this out. But when they come, you better pray they believe your story, because I'm going to make sure you never see the outside of a jail cell." He stormed off, and Ethan closed the door, his hands shaking. From the bedroom, he heard quiet crying. He walked down the hall and knocked softly. "Girls? It's me." He's gone. The lock clicked, and the door opened. All 4 girls stood there, Lily with her arms around the triplets, trying to be brave even though tears streaked her face. "I'm sorry," Sophie sobbed. "I'm so sorry. We should go back. We don't want you to get in trouble because of us." Ethan knelt down and pulled all 4 girls into his arms. "Listen to me. You're not going anywhere. I don't care what he says. You're safe here. But the police, if the police come, I'll tell them the truth. That's all we can do." He pulled back, looking at each of their faces. "I need you to be brave for me, okay? Can you do that?" They nodded, but their eyes told a different story. They'd learned young that promises from adults meant nothing. An hour later, Ethan was proven right. 2 police officers showed up at his door, their expressions professional but wary. Officer Martinez was older, maybe 50, with kind eyes that had seen too much. Her partner, Officer Chen, looked fresh out of the academy, his hand resting on his belt like he expected trouble. "Mr. Walker, I'm Officer Martinez. We got a call about a possible child abduction?" Ethan stepped aside. "Come in. The girls are here. They're safe." He explained everything, finding the triplets on the bench, their bare feet, the story about being locked outside. As he talked, Martinez took notes, her expression growing darker with each detail. Chen went to talk to the girls, kneeling down to their level, asking gentle questions. "Mr. Miller claims you kidnapped his daughters," Martinez said when Ethan finished. "He says they ran away and you convinced them to come home with you." "That's a lie. They were freezing. They were terrified. I couldn't leave them there. I understand. But legally, Mr. Miller has custody. We can't just— Look at their feet, Ethan interrupted. Look at them and tell me that man should have custody. Martinez walked to where the triplets sat on the couch, wrapped in blankets. She crouched down, and Ava slowly pulled the blanket back to reveal her feet still red and swollen, the skin cracked from frostbite. The officer's jaw tightened. She stood and pulled out her phone, stepping into the kitchen to make a call. Ethan couldn't hear everything, but he caught enough. Child services, emergency, evaluation, possible neglect charges. When she came back, her expression was carefully neutral. Someone from Child Protective Services is coming to interview the girls. Until they arrive, the children will stay here with you. But Mr. Walker, you need to understand this situation is complicated. Mr. Miller has legal rights, and unless we can prove immediate danger, he locked them outside in 15-degree weather. How is that not immediate danger? It is, but we need documentation, medical evaluations, official statements. The system has rules. The system has rules that protect abusers, Ethan said bitterly. I know. I grew up in that system. Martinez's expression softened. I'm on your side here, but you need to be smart about this. Get a lawyer. Document everything. Don't give Mr. Miller any ammunition to use against you. After the officers left, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, his head in his hands. The girls were quiet in the living room, watching a Christmas movie on the old TV, but the joy had been sucked out of the day. This wasn't how Christmas was supposed to feel. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. Mr. Walker? This is Dana Chen from Child Protective Services. I'm on my way to your apartment to speak with the Miller children. I should be there in about 20 minutes. Okay. They're here. Good. And Mr. Walker? Officer Martinez filled me in on the situation. You did the right thing bringing those girls in from the cold. But moving forward, we need to follow proper procedures. Do you understand? I understand. But he didn't. Not really. Because proper procedures meant forms and evaluations and court dates that could take months, while 3 little girls hung in limbo, wondering if they'd be sent back to the man who'd hurt them. Dana Chen arrived exactly 20 minutes later, a woman in her 30s with a briefcase and an air of exhausted competence. She spent an hour talking to the triplets, asking questions in a gentle voice while taking notes. Ethan waited in the kitchen, trying not to pace, trying not to think about worst-case scenarios. When she finally emerged, her expression was grim. Mr. Walker, I'm going to be frank with you. Based on what I've seen and heard, I believe these children are in danger with their father. The physical evidence alone, the frostbite, the malnutrition, is enough for me to recommend emergency removal. Relief flooded through Ethan. So they can stay here? It's not that simple. I can authorize a temporary emergency placement, but you're not a licensed foster parent. Normally, the girls would go to a licensed home or a group facility while we investigate. No. The word came out harder than Ethan intended. You can't split them up. They need to stay together. I agree. But there are protocols. Then make an exception. Ethan's voice rose. Please, they trust me. Lily's been helping them feel safe. If you send them somewhere else, somewhere with strangers, you'll traumatize them all over again. Dana studied him for a long moment. You realize what you're asking for? If I place them with you temporarily, you'll need to undergo a background check, home inspection, the works, and there's no guarantee they'll stay with you permanently. Mr. Miller has the right to challenge this in court. I don't care, whatever it takes. She pulled out a tablet and started typing. I'll need your full legal name, social security number, employment information, references. The questions went on for another hour. Meanwhile, Lily had convinced the triplets to help her build a blanket fort in the living room, and their quiet giggles were the first truly happy sound Ethan had heard from them. Finally, Dana stood. Okay, I'm authorizing a temporary emergency placement of Sophie, Ava, and Ella Miller into your care, pending full investigation. Someone will be by in the next few days to do a home inspection. We'll need medical evaluations for the prey, girls, therapy assessments, the whole process. Whatever you need. She handed him a stack of papers. Read these carefully. You're responsible for their well-being now. Any signs of abuse or neglect, and they'll be removed immediately. Understood? Understood. After she left, Ethan stood in his living room, looking at the blanket fort, where 4 little girls sat whispering and giggling. He'd just committed to taking care of 3 children he'd known for less than 24 hours. He had no savings, no backup plan, no idea how he'd afford food and clothes and everything else they'd need. But when Sophie peeked out from the fort and smiled at him, actually smiled, the first real smile he'd seen on her face, Ethan knew he'd made the right choice. The next 3 days passed in a blur. Medical appointments confirmed moderate malnutrition and frostbite. The doctor who examined them grew visibly angry when she saw the extent of their neglect, and her report to CPS left no room for misinterpretation. Jason Miller, meanwhile, hired a lawyer. A good one, apparently, because on the 4th day after Christmas, Ethan received notice of a custody hearing scheduled for the following week. He couldn't afford a lawyer. Between his 2 jobs and the cost of feeding 5 people instead of 2, his account was already screaming. But Mrs. Patterson, bless her heart, had a grandson who just passed the bar and agreed to take the case pro bono. He's going to fight this hard, James Patterson told Ethan during their first meeting. The young lawyer looked tired but determined. Jason Miller's arguing that you manipulated his daughters into leaving, that you've turned them against him, that you're an unstable single father with no right to keep them. I'm an unstable single father? Ethan's voice rose. He locked them outside to freeze. I know. But he's claiming it was a misunderstanding, that he stepped out for 5 minutes and they exaggerated. Without witnesses to contradict him. It becomes, he said, she said. The girls will testify. They'll tell the truth. James grimaced. That's the problem. Miller's lawyer is going to argue that the girls are too young to give reliable testimony, that they've been coached by you. Family court judges are hesitant to remove children from biological parents without overwhelming evidence. Ethan felt the room spinning. So what are you saying? That he might win? That those girls might go back to him? I'm saying we need to be prepared for a fight. We need character witnesses, documentation of your ability to provide for them, proof that you're the better option. And we need the girls to be strong enough to tell their story, no matter how hard his lawyer pushes. That night, Ethan sat the triplets down. They were doing better, wearing clothes that fit, eating regular meals, sleeping through the night without nightmares. Lily had become their fierce protector, teaching them games and sharing her toys and making sure they always felt included. Girls, I need to talk to you about something important, Ethan said gently. Next week, we have to go to court. There's going to be a judge who decides where you live. Your father wants you to come back home with him. All 3 faces went pale. Ella started crying silently, the way she did when she was trying to be brave. We don't want to go back, Sophie whispered. Please don't make us go back. I'm not going to make you do anything. But the judge is going to ask you questions about your dad, about what happened, about whether you want to stay here. And you're going to have to be very brave and tell the truth, even if it's scary. Can you do that? They looked at each other, that silent communication passing between them again. Then all 3 nodded. We'll be brave, Ava said. If it means we can stay with you and Lily, we'll be brave. Ethan pulled them close, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. These children trusted him. They believed he could protect them, and he had no idea if he'd be able to keep that promise. The week crawled by. Ethan worked double shifts, trying to save every penny for the future he hoped they'd have. Lily helped the triplets practice their reading, taught them how to ride her bike, showed them that childhood could be something other than fear and hunger. On the night before the hearing, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that could go wrong. What if the judge sided with Jason? What if the girls were forced back into that house? What if... Mr. Ethan, he sat up. Sophie stood in the hallway, her face illuminated by the nightlight. What's wrong, sweetheart? Bad dream? She walked over and climbed onto the couch beside him. I wanted to say thank you for everything. Even if we have to go back tomorrow, even if the judge says we can't stay. Thank you for making us feel safe. Nobody ever made us feel safe before. Ethan's throat tightened. He put his arm around her small shoulders. You're not going back. I won't let that happen. You promise? He thought about all the broken promises in his own childhood, all the adults who'd sworn they'd protect him and then disappeared. He thought about making a promise he might not be able to keep. "I promise I'll fight with everything I have," he said. "That's all I can promise." "But it's the truth." Sophie leaned her head against his shoulder. "That's more than anyone's ever promised us before." They sat there in the darkness, and Ethan made a silent vow. No matter what it took, no matter what he had to sacrifice, he would keep these children safe, even if it meant going to war with the entire system to do it. The courtroom was smaller than Ethan had imagined, with fluorescent lights that made everyone look sickly and pale. He sat at a wooden table beside James Patterson, his hands clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. Behind him, in the gallery, Mrs. Patterson sat with Lily and the triplets, all of them dressed in their best clothes, which for the triplets meant outfits Mrs. Patterson had bought from the thrift store because they'd arrived at Ethan's apartment with nothing. Across the aisle, Jason Miller sat with his lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Victoria Cross, who looked like she ate cases like this for breakfast. Jason had cleaned up, shaved, wearing a pressed shirt, looking every bit the concerned father fighting to get his children back. If Ethan hadn't seen him drunk and raging at his door, he might have believed the act. Judge Patricia Reeves entered, and everyone stood. She was in her 60s, grey-haired, with reading glasses perched on her nose and an expression that gave nothing away. "This is a hearing regarding the emergency custody placement of Sophie, Ava, and Ella Miller," she said, settling into her seat. "I've reviewed the reports from Child Protective Services, the medical evaluations, and the initial police report. Miss Cross, you're representing Mr. Jason Miller?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And Mr. Patterson, you're representing Mr. Ethan Walker?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Then let's begin. Miss Cross, call your first witness." Victoria Cross stood, smoothing her skirt. "I call Jason Miller to the stand." Jason walked to the witness box, his movements careful, controlled. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, and Ethan wanted to scream. "Mr. Miller," Cross began, her voice sympathetic, "can you tell the court what happened on Christmas Eve?" Jason's face crumpled with what looked like genuine remorse. "I made a terrible mistake, Your Honor. I'd been working double shifts, trying to make enough money to give my girls a good Christmas. I came home exhausted, and the girls had gotten into the pantry without asking. I was stressed, overwhelmed, and I overreacted. I told them to wait outside while I cleaned up the mess, just for a few minutes so I could calm down. And what happened next? I fell asleep on the couch. I didn't mean to. I was just so tired. When I woke up, it was late and the girls were gone. I searched everywhere, panicking, thinking something terrible had happened. Then a neighbor told me they'd seen a man walking with 3 little girls, and I followed the trail until I found them at Mr. Walker's apartment. It was a masterful performance. Jason's voice cracked in all the right places, his eyes welling with tears that might have even been real. Ethan felt sick. "Mr. Miller, have you ever intentionally harmed your daughters?" "Never. I love those girls more than life itself. They're all I have left after their mother abandoned us. I'm not perfect, I'll admit. I've struggled with drinking in the past, but I've been sober for 2 weeks now. I'm attending AA meetings. I'm getting help. All I want is the chance to be the father they deserve." Cross nodded sympathetically. "No further questions, Your Honor." James Patterson stood, buttoning his jacket. "Mr. Miller, you testified that you told the girls to wait outside for a few minutes. Is that correct?" "Yes." "The police report states they were found at approximately 11 p.m. What time did you send them outside?" Jason hesitated. I'm not sure exactly. Around 7, maybe. So 4 hours. You're calling 4 hours in 15-degree weather a few minutes?" "I told you." I fell asleep. "The medical report shows the girls had moderate frostbite on their feet. They were barefoot, Mr. Miller. Why weren't they wearing shoes? They must have taken them off. Kids do that. In winter, in the snow." James's voice hardened. "The girls also showed signs of malnutrition. Can you explain that?" "Read, we're poor. I do the best I can." "The girls testified to Child Protective Services that you regularly left them alone at night while you went to bars. Is that true?" "Sometimes I needed to clear my head. Yes or no, Mr. Miller? Did you leave 3 6-year-old children alone at night? Jason's mask slipped for just a second, anger flashing in his eyes. Sometimes, for short periods. How short? An hour? 2? The entire night? I always came back. That's not what I asked. James pulled out a document. I have statements from 3 of your neighbors describing multiple instances of hearing the children crying alone in your apartment late at night. One neighbor, Mrs. Chen, states she called the police in November after hearing the girls screaming for help. Do you recall that incident? Jason's lawyer stood. Objection, Your Honor. This is harassment. Overruled. Answer the question, Mr. Miller. The girls were fine. They were just being dramatic. James looked at the judge. No further questions. Jason returned to his seat, his jaw clenched. Cross called a character witness next, a friend of Jason's who testified about what a good father he'd been before his wife left, how he was just going through a hard time, how everyone deserved a second chance. Then it was James's turn. I call Ethan Walker to the stand. Ethan's legs felt like water as he walked to the witness box. He could feel the triplets watching him, their eyes full of trust he prayed he wouldn't betray. James kept his questions simple. Where did Ethan work? How long had he been a single father? What made him stop to help the girls that night? I couldn't walk past them, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. They were freezing. They were terrified. I have a daughter their age, and I thought about how I'd feel if someone left Lily out in the cold like that. So I did what any decent person would do. I helped them. Have the girls adjusted well to living with you? They've been amazing. They're smart, funny, resilient. They help around the house. They play with Lily. They're doing great in the temporary school program. They're just normal kids who needed someone to give them a chance. Mr. Walker, you work 2 jobs and you're a single father. How can you afford to take care of 3 additional children? It was the question Ethan had been dreading. I picked up extra shifts. I budget carefully. Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor, helps with childcare. It's not easy, but we make it work. Those girls are worth it. Cross stood for cross-examination, her smile sharp. Mr. Walker, you've known these children for less than 2 weeks, correct? Yes. And in that time, you've formed such a strong attachment that you're willing to fight their biological father for custody. I'm fighting to keep them safe. Or perhaps you're fighting because you're lonely, because your own wife left you and you see these vulnerable children as a way to fill that void. Objection, James stood. Your Honor. Sustained, Miss. Cross, stick to relevant questions. But the damage was done. Cross continued, picking apart every aspect of Ethan's life. His modest income, his small apartment, the fact that he'd made this decision impulsively, without thinking about the long-term consequences. Isn't it true, Mr. Walker, that you can barely afford to take care of your own daughter, let alone 3 additional children? I manage. You manage? Your car is broken down. You work 70 hours a week. You live paycheck to paycheck. How is that stable environment for children? It's more stable than being locked outside to freeze. The judge's gavel came down. Mr. Walker, control yourself. Ethan took a breath, his hands shaking. I'm sorry, Your Honor. But yes, I'm not rich. Yes, I work hard to make ends meet, but those girls have never once gone to bed hungry in my house. They've never been afraid. They've never been left alone. That has to count for something. When he stepped down, he felt like he'd failed. Cross had made him look desperate, unstable, exactly the kind of person who shouldn't be trusted with children. Your Honor, James said, I'd like to call Sophie Miller to the stand. The courtroom went silent. Sophie stood from the gallery, and Ethan saw how small she looked walking to the witness box. The bailiff had to adjust the microphone down for her. Judge Reeves leaned forward. Sophie, do you understand that you need to tell the truth today? Yes, ma'am. Good. Mr. Patterson, proceed. James approached gently, his voice soft. Sophie, can you tell the judge what happened on Christmas Eve? Sophie's hands twisted in her lap. We were hungry. Daddy hadn't given us dinner, and our tummies hurt really bad, so we took some bread and cheese from the kitchen. We were trying to be quiet, but Daddy heard us. He got really mad and said we were thieves and thieves had to learn their lesson. What lesson? He said we had to stay outside until we understood that stealing was wrong. He locked the door and drove away in his truck. "Were you wearing shoes?" "Huh? No. We tried to put them on, but Daddy said we didn't deserve shoes if we were going to act like animals." Someone in the gallery gasped. "Judge." Reeves's expression remained neutral, but her pen moved furiously across her notepad. "How long were you outside, Sophie?" "I don't know. A really long time. It got darker and colder and we were so scared. Then Mr. Ethan found us. He gave us his coat even though he was cold too. He took us to his house and gave us soup and let us sleep in the warm." "Are you happy living with Mr. Ethan?" "For the first time," Sophie smiled. "Really happy. He makes us breakfast and helps with homework and tucks us in at night. Lily shares all her toys with us. Mrs. Patterson teaches us to bake cookies. It feels like a real family." "Do you want to go back to live with your father?" Sophie's smile disappeared. "No. Please don't make us go back. Please." Cross stood for cross-examination, and Ethan's stomach churned. "Sophie, did Mr. Ethan tell you what to say today?" "No, ma'am." "Are you sure? Because it sounds like you've practiced this story." "It's not a story. It's what happened." "Your father says he only sent you outside for a few minutes. Maybe you're confused about how long it was. It was hours and hours. We know because the streetlights came on, and then it got really late, and our feet hurt so bad we couldn't feel them anymore." Cross's expression hardened. "Huh, your father loves you, doesn't he?" Sophie's voice got very small. "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know? He used to love us before Mommy left, but then he changed. He started yelling all the time and leaving us alone and forgetting to buy food. I don't think he loves us anymore." "That's not true, Sophie. Your father has been fighting very hard to get you back. Then why did he lock us outside?" Sophie's voice broke. "Why did he let us freeze? Why didn't he come looking for us until the next day? If he loved us, he wouldn't have done that." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Cross tried a few more questions, but Sophie's testimony had landed like a bomb. When she stepped down, her sisters Ava and Ella were called next, and they told similar stories nights alone. Hunger, fear, the constant walking on eggshells around their father's anger. By the time Ella finished testifying, Jason Miller's face was red, his hands clenched into fists. His lawyer looked like she knew the case was slipping away. Judge Reeves called for a brief recess. Ethan stood in the hallway with the girls, all of them pressed against him, waiting. James paced, checking his phone, trying to look confident. "How do you think it went?" Ethan asked. "The girls were incredible. They told the truth, and that's powerful. But family court is unpredictable. Judges are trained to keep families together whenever possible. We just have to hope." All rise for Judge Reeves. They filed back into the courtroom. The judge settled into her seat and looked out over the assembled group, her expression grave. "I've listened carefully to all the testimony today," she began. "This is one of the most difficult decisions I've had to make in my 20 years on the bench. On one hand, we have a biological father who clearly loves his children and wants another chance. On the other hand, we have overwhelming evidence of neglect and endangerment." Ethan's heart hammered so hard he thought everyone could hear it. "Mr. Miller, I want to believe that you can change. I want to believe that the alcohol abuse and poor judgment that led to this situation can be overcome. But my primary responsibility is not to you, it's to those 3 little girls sitting in my courtroom." Jason leaned forward, his face desperate. "The medical evidence is clear, the testimony is consistent, and most importantly, the children themselves have expressed, in no uncertain terms, their fear of returning to your custody. Given all of this, I'm ruling in favor of maintaining the current placement. Temporary custody of Sophie, Ava, and Ella Miller is granted to Ethan Walker, pending a full investigation and permanent custody. Hearing in 6 months." Relief crashed over Ethan like a wave. Behind him, he heard the girls crying, but this time they were tears of joy. "Mr. Miller," the judge continued, "you will be allowed supervised visitation once a week, provided you continue with court-mandated therapy and maintain sobriety. If you can demonstrate consistent change over the next 6 months, we'll revisit custody at that time. But understand this, those children's safety is paramount. One more incident, one more sign of neglect, and you will lose all parental rights. Is that clear?" Jason's lawyer whispered something to him. He nodded stiffly, his jaw clenched. "Court is adjourned. The gavel came down, and suddenly Ethan was surrounded by 4 little girls, all of them talking at once, crying and laughing and holding on to him like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world. "We can stay?" Sophie asked through her tears. "Oh, really stay?" "Really stay," Ethan confirmed, his own voice breaking. James clapped him on the shoulder. "You did it, man. You actually did it." But Ethan knew it wasn't over. 6 months. That's all the time he had to prove he could provide a stable home, to show that 4 children could thrive under his care. 6 months to make enough money to move to a bigger apartment, to build a life that could withstand scrutiny. 6 months to become the father these girls deserved. As they walked out of the courthouse into the January cold, Lily grabbed his hand on one side, while Sophie grabbed the other. Ava and Ella flanked them, and Mrs. Patterson followed behind, beaming. "What do you say we stop for pizza on the way home?" Ethan said. "We have something to celebrate." The girls erupted in cheers, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan allowed himself to hope. 3 months passed in a blur of school meetings, therapy appointments, and home inspections. Ethan picked up every extra shift he could, saving money for the permanent custody hearing. The girls thrived, their grades improved. They made friends. They started laughing more and flinching less. Jason showed up for his supervised visits, sober and subdued, but the girls remained wary. They were polite but distant, and after each visit, they'd come home and cling to Ethan a little tighter. In May, the construction company Ethan worked for offered him a foreman position. Better pay, better hours, actual benefits. He accepted immediately and used the first paycheck to put a deposit on a 3-bedroom apartment with a small yard. By the time the permanent custody hearing arrived in June, Ethan had built a life he never imagined possible. The girls had their own room, decorated with posters they'd picked out themselves. The apartment always smelled like something baking, courtesy of Mrs. Patterson's ongoing cooking lessons. Lily had embraced her role as big sister with fierce devotion. The second hearing was shorter than the first. The social worker's report glowed with praise for the stable, loving home Ethan had created. The girls' therapist testified that they were thriving, that the bond between them and Ethan was genuine and healthy. Jason's lawyer made a final plea, arguing that her client had maintained sobriety and deserved another chance. But when Judge Reeves asked the girls, now 7 years old, where they wanted to live, they answered without hesitation. "With Mr. Ethan," Sophie said. "He's our dad now." Judge Reeves smiled for the first time in either hearing. "Then that's settled, Mr. Walker. I'm granting you full legal custody of Sophie, Ava, and Ella Miller, with the option to pursue adoption if you choose. Mr. Miller, you may petition for visitation rights, but custody will remain with Mr. Walker. Congratulations to all of you." 6 weeks later, on a warm July afternoon, Ethan stood in that same courtroom with 4 girls in matching dresses. The adoption papers sat on the judge's bench, ready to be signed. "Do you girls understand what's happening today?" Judge Reeves asked. All 3 triplets nodded. "We're becoming Walkers," Ava said proudly. "That's right. And, Mr. Walker, do you accept full responsibility for these children, legally and emotionally, for the rest of their lives?" Ethan looked at Sophie, Ava, and Ella, no longer the terrified children he'd found on a frozen bench, but confident, happy girls who called him Dad. He looked at Lily, who'd shared everything without complaint. He thought about the life they'd built together, messy and chaotic, and absolutely perfect. "I do," he said. The judge signed the papers, and just like that, his family doubled. Sophie Walker, Ava Walker, Ella Walker, his daughters, legally and forever. That evening, they celebrated at their apartment. Mrs. Patterson had made a cake decorated with 5 names. Friends from school came over, along with neighbors who'd watched this makeshift family come together. Even James Patterson stopped by, bringing a gift, a framed photo of all 5 of them on adoption day. As the sun set and the party wound down, Ethan stood on the small balcony, watching his 4 daughters play in the yard below. Lily was teaching the triplets how to play tag, their laughter floating up through the summer air. Mrs. Patterson joined him, handing him a cup of coffee. "You did good, Ethan. Real good." "I got lucky," he said. "I just happened to walk past that bus stop at the right time." Luck had nothing to do with it. You saw children in need and you helped them, even though it would have been easier to walk away. You fought for them when nobody else would. That's not luck, honey. That's love. Ethan watched Sophie catch Lily in a hug, both of them tumbling into the grass. You know what the crazy thing is? I thought I was saving them, but they saved me. They gave me a purpose, a reason to keep pushing when everything felt pointless. They made me remember what family really means. Family means showing up, Mrs. Patterson said softly, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Those girls are lucky to have you, but you're just as lucky to have them. She was right. That Christmas Eve felt like a lifetime ago, the cold, the fear, the uncertainty of what would happen next. Now, 7 months later, Ethan had something he'd never expected to have again. A complete family, a purpose, a home filled with laughter instead of emptiness. Sophie called up from the yard. "Dad, come play with us." "Dad." The word still made his heart skip. "I'll be right down," he called back. As he headed for the stairs, Ethan thought about the version of himself who'd walked home from the diner that night, exhausted and alone, just trying to survive. He'd had no idea that stopping to help 3 freezing children would transform his entire life. But that's the thing about love. It shows up in the moments you least expect it, in the people who need you most, and it changes everything. Downstairs, his daughters waited, his family, his second chance at getting it right. And as Ethan joined them in the grass, as 4 little girls piled onto him laughing and shouting, he knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice that frozen Christmas Eve. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. And sometimes, when you open your heart to help someone else, you end up healing yourself in the process. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever been in a situation where a small act of kindness changed everything? Share your story with the Soul Story family, because every act of love, no matter how small, has the power to transform lives. And if you enjoyed this journey, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting that like button. These stories are only possible because of viewers like you. Until next time, remember, you never know when your moment to make a difference will come. When it does, choose love, choose courage, choose to show up. Thank you for watching Soul Story,